And now on Nights with Steve Price from the 50UP Club, Christopher Zinn.
Yes, representing what now, Christopher? 127, 28, 29,000 members?
Well, yeah, I think we'll have some fireworks for 130,000, but it's going up. We've been involved in quite a bit recently, and that does draw people around and get awareness going, so that's very good for the numbers.
Absolutely right.
There's room for plenty more, don't worry.
Lobbying on behalf of electricity prices, which I think is a real hot issue, pardon the pun, given we've had such a freezing cold winter. I've said this a couple of times on my program. There are a lot of older Australians on the eastern seaboard this winter, particularly Sydney, because Sydney's not as equipped as some of the other southern cities for cold weather, huddling at home under blankets because they can't afford to put the heating on.
Or going to shopping centres or libraries or whatever else, from what they've told us in comments.
Dreadful, absolutely dreadful. We're going to talk about superannuation tonight. We mentioned briefly earlier in the week with Peter Switzer and Paul Rickard this nominal figure of how much is enough to have in super to have a comfortable retirement. Now, that's such an broad, open-ended question because it depends, I guess, on the quality of life that you want.
And that you're used to and what you consider normal. Yeah, exactly. It is a tricky one.
So what are you saying is a figure that is acceptable?
Well, look, what's spurred this is the Institute of Superannuation Trustees have said that there's a myth of it, you needing $1 million, although this is a figure that has been floated by various other, including the Superannuation Funds of Australia. They said you really needed $500,000 at least for couples to be comfortable. They've said the point is that a lot of this talk doesn't include the contribution of the age pension. And really you can have $150K, that will deliver $163 per week, and then you're still eligible for the pension from that. So they're arguing that the problem is people get freaked out because they won't have $1 million, and they can get vulnerable to get-rich-quick schemes, or they can do silly things with that amount of super that they have. I think they're saying, and there's a lot of good sense in that actually just make the most of your super, but when you consider it alongside the age pension, part or full, it can make a real difference. And
we're talking that figure for a couple, aren't we? I mean, we need to always be clear on that.
Yeah, well, I've seen that the million can, whether you need $1 million, that can be for a couple or an individual. Yeah, often these figures are fairly rubbery, but I think they're saying that while the average payout is about $160K at present, the typical payout's more like $100K. So, and interestingly, there's just been some figures released today, Financial Services Council, suggesting that because superannuation is not boosted to 12% until 2025, there's still going to be 80% of people still on the full or part pension by 2050. So that's after 60 years of super, 80% of people will still rely on the pension.
Well, there's a real sliding scale on this because I am of the middle super generation, if you like. I mean, it wasn't until Keating legislated that 9% of your salary in 1992, which doesn't sound that long ago, be taken out of your salary and put into superannuation. I'd worked for 20 years before superannuation became something that was compulsory. So I'm sort of in the middle. And I'm 60. So anyone who's 65 or 70, they had 30 years, 35 years working before superannuation was even talked about.
Exactly, and you've really got to be able, if you can, make those concessional payments to top it up. But, there's been a lot of rule changing and a lot of confusion around all of this. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat as you, you just make the most of whatever it is that you've got. But look, super is still a very worthwhile vehicle for all of the advantages that it brings. So it does make sense for many people. But again, we come to this issue. You really need good advice to navigate this system. But again, how do you find that in a sense that is reliable and someone's not going to churn you into decisions that suit them and not you?
And it's also very dependent on global economies. I mean, the superannuation industry quotes, and quite rightly, that it's a long-term investment, spread it out over 8 or 10 years, and they say that on a medium to low risk superannuation funds plan, you can expect somewhere between 8 and 12%. stretched over that period of time. But there were periods when we had the global financial meltdown where super went into the negative. Now, what happens if you're living off your super with a pension from your super and your super fund doesn't make any money?
Yeah, you can't. There's no comeback for that. Look, the good news, I'm told by a super insider, is that really the funds are working on schemes to really smooth out those returns over time. So there are better outcomes, and this is the idea of pooled schemes, which allow you to get the benefits of growth asset classes through the entire life rather than those low fixed incomes in retirement. So look, there is innovation coming, but again, one of the issues is our engagement as consumers with super, how much we drive them to innovate or how much we just sort of sit back and just let them do it one way or another.
And the best advice I've heard also is, look, work out what from your super, what your minimum requirement of income is for a year. And if you possibly can, keep in cash within your super that amount of money for that year or years when it goes backwards. Because then what you can do is you can draw down on that money until the markets recover, as they invariably do.
And look, that's a good discipline. And I think it highlights another point that this sort of paper about this week about super isn't just meant to, you just live off the income. You are actually meant to eat into the super so that at the end there isn't any left. It's not meant to be handed on to the kids.
No, that's right. It's not some sort of special fund that you can just have there and hand it down.
No, and I think there are lots of myths about superannuation, but again, we're still quite early on to the system. But that's why I just say it's really worth. And ASIC, the Money Smart website, has various calculators. You can work out how much you've got, how much you need.
Yeah, that's a great website.
And I really suggest people have a look there because the idea is to be reassured and not alarmed.
Exactly. Thank you, Christopher. I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Steve.
That's Christopher Zinn there from the 50Up Club, 50upclub.com if you'd like to find out more.